Greetings, my friends. Today I am going to be doing a repair job on a microphone. Now, I am a audiobook narrator, and I use a microphone every day. This, for the last 10 years, has been my go-to microphone. This is a TS-1 Mark II tube condenser microphone. I've owned it for the better part of a decade now. And it is a really high quality, especially for the price, tube-based condenser microphone. A condenser microphone is a microphone that uses a diaphragm, which you can see here, the light glinting off of it. That is a capacitor with a film that has, it's mylar, and it has been sputtered with gold. It's a very thin coating of gold in a process similar to making sunglasses and so forth, those silvery reflective sunglasses. But they coat it with mylar to make it conductive, and then on the other side, I believe, is a plate probably made of brass, I think. In any case, you can see that there's a lead in the middle of the diaphragm and a lead in the middle of the back of it. And the back is stiff, the front is not. So when I speak into the microphone here, the vibrations are picked up on the diaphragm. This thing is a capacitor that has been charged by an electrical circuit that is connected to the microphone here via a cable. I don't have the power supply here right now. And the changes in that capacitance cause the signal to be reproduced, and then you can amplify that signal, and so on. One of the advantages of a large diaphragm condenser microphone, especially for folks like myself with a deep and relatively resonant voice, is that they're very good at picking up the subtler details of how our voice sounds and so forth. However, this one is a tube-based. It literally uses a vacuum tube, and it's in here. It uses a kind of tube called a sub-miniature tube, very small. They're probably a lot smaller than the ones that you're used to seeing in things like televisions and the like. Or your guitar amplifiers and so forth. These are very small. And the original versions of these, the 5840, which is what is in here, I believe were mostly made for military radio type applications. They're extremely rugged. Some versions of them can handle shocks of up to 400 gravities, which is, pretty impressive. However, just like any other vacuum tube, they do eventually wear out. And this one did. After about 10 years, it finally failed, and the microphone, instead of sounding just absolutely quiet unless I was talking, started making a sound like it was in a wind tunnel. So clearly the tube needed to be replaced. Unfortunately, the company that made these, Chameleon Labs, they no longer make microphones. They make high-end audio processing equipment, but they don't make these microphones anymore, and they don't support them anymore. And I don't really blame them. They haven't sold one in forever, so really there's no point in supporting it. So I had an option. I could throw it away, or I could try and repair it. So I got myself some new 5840 tubes. These are actually old Raytheon new old stock tubes, and they're not identical to the one inside here, as we'll see in a moment. But I'm told that they are electrically similar, and so hopefully we will see this thing working again. So first we need to disassemble it. So the capsule here comes off. This is one of my favorite things about the TS-1 microphones, is that these capsules can be changed out. I only use this one most of the time, but it comes with a small diaphragm capsule that is end addressed, so you talk into it from into here. There's a little capsule that goes there, and there's a couple of other capsules as well that are great for different kinds of audio recording, whether you're miking, for example, a drum or a violin or a singer, or in my case, a speaker. So I don't need to do anything with this. I'm just going to put it aside for the moment. And now we're going to work on disassembling the body. Now this, being a custom microphone as it was built back in the day, is actually kind of tricky to disassemble. And I had to do some research on it, because it's not just as simple as removing these screws. That's part of it. But when I first looked at it, you would see these holes here. And the thing you would think is, oh, you just put a pair of pliers or a pair of circlip pliers in there and twist it. Don't do that. If you have a TS-1 Mark II or an older TS-1, which is pretty much the same microphone with a slightly different power supply, do not do that. You will literally break the circuit board in half inside. You will destroy the microphone, probably beyond any ability to repair it. It has a very interesting little thing here. You got to look closely. You can see where my thumb is, and I'm sorry, my hands are kind of mangled. But there's a notch here on this side, and there is a notch here on this side. And what I found out is that when these were originally made, there was a special tool for them. And I don't have that tool, so I had to kind of loosen it up very, very carefully with a small screwdriver that I just pressed in there and shoved on both sides slowly. And you have to be extremely careful not to damage these threads, or you won't be able to put the capsules back on. So you got to be super careful about that. But basically what happens, I've left this a little bit loose because I already took it off earlier. You can just twist this threaded ring. And the threaded ring goes inside the body and acts not only as a way to mount the capsule, but also serves to hold the circuit board and this silver cap that connects to the capsule in place. So then the next thing we need to do is remove these 3 set screws from, sorry about that, bumped the camera, from the bottom of the microphone. That's very easy, he said. Let me position the light a little bit better. Okay. And what I like to do is make sure I keep all my parts in one place, but this little ring serves as a nice little screw corral. So I'll just put the ring there and remove the screws and drop them into my little ring there so they all stay in one place. If there were more parts, I'd put them in a baggie, or I've got some little jewelry cups that I can use for that sort of thing, but not necessary for what we're doing here. Just the 3 screws and the ring. Okay. So then that comes out. Now you have to be very, very careful with this kind of equipment, but then the whole thing just slides out the end right here. And then the body, as you can see, is just a aluminum tube. We're going to set that down. We don't need to do anything with it now. So here's the tube itself. This is the Raytheon 5840W original tube. So what we'll need to do, and these tubes were probably, this one was probably made in the 1980s, but these tubes were being manufactured as far back as the 1950s. I think the first ones were either 1953 or 1957. And I'm told by more or less reliable sources that they were used in things like airplanes and missile systems for radio control, because they're good for high frequency kind of work. So this, what we have here is some plastic, and I really want to keep that plastic intact. So I'm trying not to cut it, but I want to get this, this tape off. So I'm just very gently picking the tape up. I'm going to replace the tape when I'm done, but this will let me remove this plastic sleeve. So I'm just going to get rid of the tape. Okay, and there's another piece of tape around here someplace. Yeah, it's right here. Kind of hard to see. I don't want to damage any of the electronics. I don't think I will, but this X-Acto knife is great for just kind of like getting under the edge of the tape without cutting the plastic, because the plastic serves to keep the circuit itself protected from the metal inside so that you don't run the risk of any short circuits or anything like that. And it would be hard to replace this piece of plastic that goes around it, because I'd have to find it and cut a new piece to fit. So I'm going to very carefully, looks like it's also sticking to some kind of paste here, so I want to carefully remove that. I'm not sure what that red paste is, but I assume it's to hold something in place. Okay, so now here we can now see this is the tube, and the tube is gone bad, sadly. It has failed. So I'm going to have to desolder each of these points. So there's 1, 2, 3. There should be 7. This is an 8-pin tube, but you can see pin 8 if you look very closely. I'll take this off so I can point at it very closely. Pin 8, he said it doesn't keep the thing in the frame of the camera. pin 8 is right there, and it has been cut off. So this is, we're only using 7 of the pins. And if you look up the data sheet on this tube, you'll see why. That's several of these things are actually all tied into the same part. So pin 8 isn't necessary for this particular circuit. So we've got, let's see, several of these wires are actually underneath the thing. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It looks like we may actually only be using 6 of these. Very difficult to say. Okay, I'm going to cut off the recording for the time being, and we'll come back once I've gotten this thing off, because I need to be able to work without possibly damaging the camera. But in a moment, through the magic of editing, we'll have the tube removed. Be right back. All right, we're back. As you can see, magic. So I desoldered and removed this old 5840 tube from the body of the microphone. As you can see, there were several soldering points in here that I needed to remove. And so what's interesting, though, is that this tube is a pentode, and it has a specific pinout. And you can, if you look closely at the base, I don't know how well this is going to come through on the camera, but I'll try. These types of devices start here with pin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And as you can see, pins 2 and 8 are cut off. They were not being used. It helps if I keep it in the frame. Pins 2 and 8 were not being used in the circuit because this was not being, those particular ones weren't being used in this particular circuit. So that meant that I only had to desolder 6 wires to remove it. And each one of these things is a specific length that needs to go to a specific point in the circuit. It's going to take a little doing to get these things replaced properly. I've got a new replacement tube, and here's the part that's interesting. I had to order these online. These are Raytheon long number tubes. These are replacements for 5840s, but what I didn't realize was I wasn't getting an exact replacement for a 5840. I am told that these are electrically the same, so we're going to find out once I install them. But what's interesting is these are an electron tube. I'm pretty sure that these things were made, packaged, if you can read that, in July of 1985. And so these are a specific type of these tubes. They are the ruggedized versions of the 5840. And these ones, I could not find a data sheet for these. They did not exist. I found data sheets for the 5840, but the pinout on this one is a bit different. I'm going to get this thing out of the box. It's funny, this thing has been in here since 1985. Now, we're going to notice a couple things that are different right away. The tube is about the same size, which is great. The length is the same and so forth. The diameter is the same, but you'll notice that the base is different. See, the same size tube, but the base is different. This tube here on the right, the original had what's called a B7G base, or B8G, I don't know, a circular pin base. This one has a base that is 7 pins in line. Instead of 8 pins, this one only has 7, which means that it's already a little bit different mechanically from the other one. And it took a bit of digging to figure out how I could make this thing fit with this circuit. Like I said, the data sheets for this particular one I could not find. You can buy these tubes, you can find them all over the internet, but the data sheet doesn't exist. Apparently people use these a lot. I did find this, I printed it out, and it shows the pinout that is on this thing. And I looked at it under a magnifying glass and under a jeweler's loupe, and I believe it's correct. We'll find out when I hook it up and put it in the circuit. When I solder the sucker in and put it together, we'll find out. It'll work or it won't. But this one has a mark on this side, as you can see, there's no mark on this side. That mark says pin 1. In this case, the person said anode, but that's really not correct for a vacuum tube. That should be more correctly the plate. So that's the plate, is pin 1, pin lead 2. The second one is gate 2. The 3 and 4 are the heaters. 5 is gate 3, which we won't be using in this circuit. It's unused in this. 6 is the cathode, and 7 is the control grid. So we will find out what happens when I put this thing in the circuit. So I've got a little bit of work to do. I've got to put some insulating sleeves on these, shrink wrap them, make sure they're the right length. I got to get it in here. That's going to take some doing, and I can't really do that with the camera. So once again, we're going to have some magic editing, and then you'll see this tube installed in this microphone. So be right back. And we're back. So what I've done is removed the old tube, obviously. We talked about that a moment ago. And I got the new tube, and I had to go and do some pretty creative finagling to figure out exactly how to get the wires to go where I needed them to go, because this one has a different pinout than this. And this one only has 7 leads. This one has 8, although only 6 are being used on this one. And so one of these is now removed as well. As part of the process of desoldering it, I had to remove this wire, which I'll solder back in here in place when I'm ready to put it back together. I'm just about ready to solder it. There is one small fly in the ointment. I don't think it's going to actually pose too much of a challenge, but the original tube, if you look closely, the original tube's body is actually a little bit shorter. The body, see, this is the thing. The body itself is the same length. They're identical. They even both say Raytheon. But because of the way the base is made on this one, it's got this flange of glass that's been clamped over the leads. It's about, I don't know, about 1/3 of a centimeter longer, which means that it didn't quite fit right. So I really had to shove it in there pretty good. What I did after that was to make sure that I didn't get any crossed leads, and there's actually, it looks like there might be a risk of one in there. So I'm going to go in there and make sure that there's no way that those can touch, because, you know, we don't want crossed wires in there. And then I'm going to glue it down. I've got some heat shrink tubing on them. I'm going to probably adjust that a little bit so it comes up closer to the base. And we'll shrink that up, solder it in, and then we'll do the test. So once more, I will be back in a moment to show you what it looks like after it's been soldered and as we reassemble. Stand by. All right, well, the microphone is reassembled. I put a bead of hot glue underneath here, because underneath the tube is a bead of solder that I was a little concerned might damage the glass case a little bit. As you can see, the tip of the tube is pushing these capacitors out a little bit. I'm hoping that the rearrangement will not cause any undue negative effects. I don't think it will. I also put a little bit of glue here just to stabilize these leads. So now all that remains is to reassemble this thing and give it a test. We'll give it a whirl. So reassembling it is as simple as putting this plastic back on it. It's got this lovely window in it so the tube doesn't melt the plastic, and the case here, the microphone casing, has a vent for the tube so that the heat from the tube doesn't overpower anything, so that's good. Add a little bit of tape here. We'll just put the tape back where it was. Mine's a little larger, but that is all right. And then another little spot of tape there. All right, and then the entire thing goes in here. Oh, one of the things I figured out as I was reassembling it to test fit, there's a screw here on the side. Then if you look carefully in the bottom, there's a channel. The screw head has to go into that channel to make sure it's oriented properly inside the tube, inside the mic body. So we'll need to make sure that that remains properly set. Okay. Something's going on here. It's not wanting to stay. I want it to. This plastic is shifting around a bit. I may need to tape the plastic to the base in some way and keep it in place. Let's see if we can get this to work. Definitely never want to force anything here, because that's the fastest way to break it. You want to be firm, but don't put too much pressure on it. Okay, I'm going to need to put just a little bead of tape around the base, I think, just to hold it here. I don't want to cover that screw, but I need to keep this thing in place so that it goes into the body properly. Thinking I need to just make this a little tighter. I think that was what I did, was that the plastic is not quite wrapped tightly enough around the body of the mic. We will get there one way or the other. We will get to where we need to go. All right, let's get our X-Acto knife out. Slice this open. Where are you at? There you are. Let's do this again, only this time let's make it nice and tight. First time I've ever done this, so some issues were to be expected. I thought you wanted this kind of loose, but I think now that I see what happened, this plastic needs to be pretty tight around the body of the mic. So pull that snug, fit it down. Another little bead of tape here. Let's see, we want to be careful not to cover the window part. Well, you'd think I'd be better at working with tape, wouldn't you? Apparently, this evening, tape is my kryptonite. All right, let's give this a try. Yeah, much better. Much better. Okay, now we'll put the ring back in. Almost there. I'm just going to tighten this as much as I can with my fingers and maybe just give it a little bit of a push with a screwdriver, because I don't want it to be too tight if I have to take it back apart. Without the tool to do it, I really don't want to really reef on this thing too much and make it too tight. That's probably good enough for now. Let's get my little screwdriver out. And let's put these screws in. And as soon as I'm done here, then I will be off to go and test it. And I will report back with my findings. And maybe a sample, if it works. If it doesn't work, I will be very sad and probably won't post this video. Okay, let's go and test it. I'll be back in a bit. Smaller eateries perched on the corners at the strip mall's entrances. There was a drive-up ATM located in the center of the pavement, about halfway between the boulevard and the stores. On one side of the lot was a row of 6 electric vehicle charging stations, 3 of which were in use.